So I'll start with my greeting. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and in Europe. Good early evening to our friends in Turkey, the Arab states. Good early evening to our friends in, good evening to our friends in India. And good evening to our friends in Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, and good late evening to our friends in Australia. Hope you are all well. Nice to see your faces. It's been a little while. JC informed me we have some questions.
Dear Ajahn, can you talk a little about some tools to work with a tendency to want to always be right, and how to practice on letting that unhelpful personality trait go, please?
Dear Ajahn, can you talk about some tools for practicing with the tendency to always want to be right? So there is actually a Pali phrase for this, and it's in this list of the 16 upakilesa, qualities that darken the mind, negative qualities that darken the mind. The mana is one of them, conceit, and ditthi, as in samma ditthi, right view, views. When those words go together, ditthi and mana, you have the conceit of views. And so the way that manifests, or the way that can manifest, is with a feeling of my opinion is right, my understanding is better, I'm right, you're wrong. And Lumpur Cha said that for modern people, Westerners, he was talking about at the time, but I think it's probably more accurate to say modern people now, it's one of our biggest challenges is the fault-finding mind and feeling that we know best. How do we work with it? So first of all, it's good to know that it's a common problem. It's not something that this person is struggling with all alone. Lots of people think they're right, even when they're very wrong. And there's an interesting, how do we define right and wrong? So it's nice to use the word skillful and unskillful, I think. And the thing about delusion, it's a fascinating contemplation, actually. Because of ignorance, because of not knowing the phenomenon according to their characteristics, there is delusion. And delusion means we're deluded. The thing about delusion, it has an interesting quality to it. When you're deluded, you don't know you're deluded. So oftentimes when people are deluded, they think they're right. The more deluded they are, the more right they think they are. And so it's a good thing to make a mental note of. If ever you're feeling like you're really, really, really right, and someone else is really, really, really wrong, you're probably deluded. And there's a I'm trying to think of I think one of the ways in terms of working with it, I think it is sometimes good. One has to be skillful in how one approaches this, but thinking of times when you thought you were right when you were wrong. So you might have had a disagreement with somebody, or you might have had an opinion, and some time went by, and you got more information, you got a different perspective, you chatted with a few people, you realized in hindsight that you felt really, really strongly about something. Some time went by, and you realize, hey, I was wrong about that. And we don't do this as a way to beat ourselves up or lose self-esteem. We do it just to acknowledge, hey, sometimes when I feel that I'm right, I was wrong. And the thing that we learn from that exercise is we get some practice at acknowledging that we make mistakes sometimes, errors in judgment. And then what Luang Por Chah was training people with this phrase, my nair, to recite to oneself, because this tendency to be formulating an opinion, grasping the opinion, believing the opinion, being a bit contentious with others in our minds, he would have us say to that, it's not sure, it's not sure. Another way to say it is, another way you can say to yourself is like, yeah, maybe. So whenever you get a strong opinion going about something, and you can say to yourself, yeah, maybe. And it's just a way of saying to oneself that you don't believe this entirely. That little bit of space, that there's a little bit of room for a different perspective. Now, in terms of conventions and conventionally what is skillful, conventionally what is unskillful, conventionally what is right, what is wrong, Ajahn Anan once said to me that a really important thing in practice is overcoming yourself when you're right. So that was a very interesting teaching. So even when you are right, one has to be able to let that go sometimes. And sometimes that might be, for example, in the area of communal harmony. If you're going to insist that you're right about something and keep on bringing it up, that might not be helpful. Sometimes you're right and others are wrong. If it's not that important, sometimes you just have to be quiet, be humble. And so, in terms of one's own practice, when we understand that we're trying to let go of attachment to everything, so we do have to grasp at skillful conditions. We do have to grasp at being ethical. We do have to grasp at being forgiving and patient. We do have to grasp at putting a lot of effort into meditation. But aside from that, we're trying to let go of our attachment to our opinions, and we're trying to let go of perceiving things as a self. So being able to have some space around all of our opinions, the skillful ones, the unskillful ones, is helpful. Learning to grasp them much more gently. So yes, as I was saying, recollect the times when you thought you were right and you were wrong. Remind yourselves that you don't have all of the information all the time. We can also just recollect the downside of it. If you try to talk lately to somebody who has relatives or friends or who's been to Palestine about what they think's going on in Gaza, and then you try to talk with someone who may be Jewish or from Israel and what they're talking about what's going on in Israel, and to most of the people on the Israel side of the thing, there's only one right. They're right. The Palestinians and Hamas are wrong. From the side of the point of view of the Palestinians, the Israelis are completely wrong, and they're right, and there's only one right. And it's like impossible even to have a conversation. It seems like even to say, can we have a ceasefire? Can we talk about it? Even that seems too much, because no, there's only one right here. That side needs to be obliterated. And the other side says, no, there's only one right here. The other side needs to be obliterated. And so you can see where what being right can lead to. And Luang Por Chah also uses the phrase, it's right, but it's not correct. Sometimes he was talking about, I can't remember the exact story, but there was some kind of the way somebody was making their point or going about things, was saying, yeah, it's right, but it's not correct. And that's another interesting phrase. Like, you might be right, but insisting that you're right all the time is not correct. One of the highest blessings, if you look at the Mangala Sutta, is humility. Humility is a quality that brings the highest blessings. So sometimes, if it's not important, one can practice, okay, I know more than this person in this situation, but it's not such an important thing to say so. So I'm going to train myself at being humble. I'm not going to say anything. I'll be quietly, humbly right, and no one else will even know. It's a beautiful practice. I think it's in the 7-limb prayer. It's part of the Tibetan practices. There's a practice called the 7-limb prayer, I believe. No. I think it's the 8 verses of thought transformation. Yes, the 8 verses of thought transformation. one of the verses for thought transformation is offering the victory to others. So it's like, rather than being right, and so sometimes it's good to recite these verses. They are good verses to recite. I think if I can remember a few of them, when you meet somebody of extremely negative nature, visualize that person above your head and see them as your teacher. That's one of those famous verses. You're my teacher because you're teaching me patience. You're teaching me compassion. You're teaching me forgiveness. Hello, dear teacher. And another one is, when someone you have helped treats you in very bad ways, you should see that one as a precious treasure because such a person is hard to find. I don't know, in my life, they weren't that hard to find. But anyway, let's not go there. And the other one is offering the victory to others. You might be right. You can be contentious, but you give them the victory. So just kind of taking it on as a practice, another way of relating to these things. So that we learn how to, because if we develop a big sense of self, I have more learning, I have more experience, I've studied the subject more, I do know more. When you come to sit, there's going to be a big sense of self. And then it's going to be harder to have insight into not self, which is what we all want. But if you practice with maybe you're right, maybe you're not, maybe you don't have all the information, maybe you don't have to say anything on this occasion, let them think they're right, just smile. And you learn a lot about this in Thailand. Like you learn about just smiling and not being contentious, because that's a large part of the way things are done around here. And it doesn't mean you agree with them. It just means that you're choosing to smile. And you might be smiling knowing you're wrong, actually. It might be I know you're wrong smile. But they don't know that. It's just a smile. And another thing you learn in Southeast Asia is about truth, how relative it is. You know, it is important to be truthful, but one of the things you learn in Thailand is that people tell you the part of the truth that they think you need to know. And not the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But you might find out there's other aspects to the truth a bit later. But there is a way, that can be helpful as well, like learning how to present things in a ways that are more gentle or less contentious. One can learn how one expresses truth. But there are benefits to having more spaciousness around our views. The conceit of views is an obstruction, and we want to lessen our conceit. We want to be more humble. We want to have space. So, but it's an ongoing practice, and it's a deep tendency, and you're not alone. I wish you all the best in your learning how to hold your views humbly.
Question to the Ajahn. I'm interested in psychology and the dynamic of human relationships. I'm aware that I am a highly sensitive person, extreme empath, and on the 16 personality scale, I'm classed as the advocate. I'm very seldom triggered by personal offense since I started learning and practicing Buddhism. But I still can get easily triggered by certain issues of injustice in social dialogues or when standing up for an individual. I can feel that my emotional upset is underpinned by some judgment, and it is not unwholesome at times. How can I overcome this?
Yes. It is tricky, as I have some empathy with this person because I'm an empath also, and I'm also highly sensitive, I suspect. And the thing about being a good person, this is where it gets tricky. The foundation of being a practicing Buddhist is being a good person, conventionally speaking. And the thing about being a good person is that you do care. So you do care about things like justice, you care about things like fairness, you care about other people's well-being, you wish well to others. And the shadow of that is when people appear to be being harmed, then you can get upset. And it's interesting because as a monk, deep commitment to truthfulness in my life. And I've always had a very truthful tendency. And the shadow side of this is like there's something in me that actually hates lies and hates deceit. And if I feel like I'm being lied to, it stimulates a lot of energy to find out what the truth is. It's just a deep character tendency, but it can be, the shadow side of loving the truth is really not liking lies and deception. And one has to know how to hold that in the right amount and put limits on one's truth seeking and have plenty of time to rest with the breath. And it's the same theme, it's like right and wrong and learning how to hold different ways of being right. When I was a little boy and my dad and a teenager, my dad would come home at about 6:30 and we'd have dinner together. So it was very nice that the family's having the evening meal together. But my dad would like to watch the news while we ate the meal. And then so I would see the war victims, the starving Africans. And because I was a sensitive little boy, I would say, Dad, do we have to watch this while we're eating? And my dad would say, you should know what's going on in the world, so you'll be grateful for what you have. I said, I am grateful for what I have, but when I see people starving to death, I don't feel hungry anymore. I feel bad. My father, for whatever reason, wasn't affected. He was tucking into his T-bone steak and his salad, and seeing people starving to death didn't seem to affect him very much. But it did affect me. And one day I raised my voice at him. We'd had this conversation, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, 50 times. And I raised my voice at him one day. I said, Dad, can I ask you something? Did you ever, even once, when you saw one of these starving children, make a donation to the Feed the Africans campaign? I mean, what is the point of watching if you're not actually going to do anything? And well, he was not impressed. But and the news, and we continued to watch the news with dinner. But it did affect me, and I noticed that it affected me more than others. And I remember once watching the cat outside in the cold, and my mum wouldn't let the cat inside. And so I went outside and I was cuddling the cat in the cold because I felt sorry for the cat. But then eventually I felt sorry for myself and I went back inside. But the thing that helps us be less self-righteous is the reflection on the law of karma. And this has to be held skillfully. But we do have to meditate upon the fact that karma is truth. Karma is truth. It's not a theory that is working partially. It's not something that you believe in when it suits you. Karma is absolute. It is what underlies much of what we experience and much of what others experience. So when we have that feeling of this person is in, and the other thing is we have to have the samsaric perspective. We have to have the 40,000, 50,000 view. You have to be able to pull back from the current situation in front of our face and understand that a person who appears to be a victim in this scenario quite possibly hurt the very person who is hurting them now in the past, and now it's coming back. And if that is the case, which one is the victim and which one is the oppressor? If the victim oppressed them first. And so we really do need to meditate on karma a lot. Now, the thing is, it's a bit dangerous because you don't want to become indifferent. You don't want to become callous. You don't want to use that phrase, well, it's just their karma, as a way to not have to feel anything. So this is where the four Brahma Viharas, they work as a package. we have compassion. But if we truly have compassion and we have right view, awareness of past lives, awareness of the future lives, if we don't liberate the mind, awareness of the workings of karma, in a scenario where you see a person abusing and you see a person abused, you actually have compassion for both of them. Because you understand that the person abusing is sowing the causes for their future abuse. So right there in that moment, you see this person sowing future misery. The Dalai Lama says when he meets people with a lot of negativity in their minds, he instantly feels more compassion for them because they need it more. This is when a person's awareness of, because he says the degree to which the kilesa are affecting a person's mind is a degree to which that mind is oppressed. And the oppressed mind is a suffering mind. So we have to do these basic recollections on karma. And then one of the things that makes equanimity possible is the awareness of the law of karma. That's what makes it possible to be equanimous. And it doesn't mean you don't care, but ideally you care for everybody. So that thinking about, sometimes it's difficult to imagine millions of past lives, but we can imagine 10 or 20 before. And we can imagine a few after, getting a samsaric perspective. And we can understand that the person who seems to be always being given a hard time has sown some difficult causes in their past where they keep meeting with these challenging circumstances. And we understand that the person who appears to be oppressing will be having challenging circumstances in the future. And then it is possible, and this is the thing about self-righteous anger, indignation. So one thing that we also have to constantly remind ourselves is that it's perfectly possible to say something in defense of another person or to state something with reason without the self-righteous indignation. I often find myself when you're getting the kind of working up in your mind, I'm going to tell this to that person, I'm going to tell that to person, and there's some energy behind it. And I formulate a beautiful opinion where it's clear that I'm obviously right, as we all have familiarity with this. And I say to myself, okay, now can you say it without the self-righteousness? How about you say the exact same thing without the tone of contempt and condescension and feeling of right? How about you just very calmly say, I think such and such. I think what you're doing is unskillful. I think this would be skillful. I don't think that's fair. Very calmly. It's perfectly possible to do it. You might have to wait for they call in Pali, aramana, in Thai, arom. You might have to wait for the arom to calm down. And you might have to make a note, I am going to say something to this person, but I'm going to say it to them when I can be calm. What's very interesting about this is, it does depend where you are, but what's very interesting about this is it's probably much more likely that the person will take you seriously if they can't project onto you that you're just a self-righteous so-and-so. If you're really calm and collected and you really speak with sound reason, the person will hear it. Some cultures are different. Some cultures you have to yell before people take you seriously. But a lot of people will take people more seriously if they speak to them calmly. Well thought out sentences. So yeah, when you have the reaction and you want to say something, you can always, and you really feel you need to, you can always make a commitment to saying it, but wait till the mind calms down. And then you go and practice the metta, think of things to be grateful for, and think of examples that you know, because the thing about social media and the modern world is, I mean, modern news channels like on TV, mainstream media, and alternative media, it's full of self-righteous people who are worked up about something, explaining why they're right and why others are wrong. So you might need to seek out an example of an expert in a field who you know who speaks very, very calmly. And there are such people. And some of my heroes during the COVID phenomenon, most people know I wasn't a big fan of the vaccines. But I still am not. And there was a wonderful doctor in America by the name of Peter McCulloch, who ran actual vaccine trials in the past. And whenever he spoke about his concerns of the dangers, he had all of his information, he had all of his research, he had his decades of experience, and he spoke very, very calmly, very, very respectfully, and with incredible, he was articulate, he was calm, he had all his facts, he spoke logically, and he became one of my heroes. Because here is a man that can be looking at things which are deeply concerning and know what is right and know what is wrong and speak like a gentleman. So he became one of my sources. This is someone to listen to because he can explain his point of view calmly, gently, respectfully, intelligently. So it's like taking people like that. Sometimes we need to find out a role model and study them. How does this person express his opinion when he's right? How does this person express his opinions when he has concerns? And so we seek out role models and study them. They do exist. I do have empathy for the highly empathic person. I wish you well.
Question 3, the Ajahn. Can you explain what is Mara's attack? Is it also known as the defilements? Or can Mara also cause obstacles to our practice? How to recognize or detect this? Or is it also the devil in us? Thank you.
What is Mara's attack? So yes, the name Mara, the word Mara gets thrown around a bit in Buddhist circles. So Lord Buddha explains to us that there are 5 Maras. I'll try to remember them all. So one is Kilesa Mara. So I often talk about the list of upakilesas, negative qualities that darken the mind. Another is Karma Mara, the Mara of the law of karma, which can obviously bind us to samsara very tightly and cause all sorts of obstructions. Another is the Mara of death. So another is, yes, Sankhara Mara. So this is where it gets a bit lofty-minded because Sankhara is all conditioned phenomenon. So all conditioned phenomenon are in the realm of Mara. And then you have Mara, the being. So there is a being called Mara. He's like the CEO of Kilesa Incorporated. And he's not the devil. He's not Satan. I believe he has a lot more power than the devil. Mara apparently lives in the realm of those who wield power of the creations of others. Paranimita Wasawati Deva. So he's above the Tushita Devas, just below the Brahma Devas. The way to get the job, CEO of Kilesa Incorporated, you need to have built a huge amount of virtue for a long, 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 long time. He has barami, he has power. So yes, there is a being. And what probably happened is he was committed to the path of virtue and goodness and accumulating merit for a long, long, long time. And because he was interested in power, at a certain point, he's taken a wrong turn. He says, well, let's try this power. Let's see what it's like to be in charge of the power of the Kilesas. And because of his merit, he was able to be. And then apparently he has an army. So there's Mara's army. And so that's the Devas with the wrong view, Devas with wrong view who want to obstruct good people. So sometimes you can see this, you can see human beings being contentious, making obstructions, kind of tripping people over just for the fun of it. You can see the way people are being like little Maras in their minds, and how if one made a habit of that, one may become a big Mara at some point. In terms of how do we relate to it as Buddhist practitioners, I don't think it's skillful to think too much about him, because it might make you kind of paranoid. There's this very, very powerful being in the heaven of the realm of wheeled creations over others who delights in obstructing good people. You know, it's not a very encouraging perception. And it's also not so helpful to think of the fact that all of the conditions that you're working with are in Mara's domain. What is helpful, but it's good to know, it's a part of right view. If we understand that the reason that we're attached to the conditioned world because of ignorance and delusion, the conditioned world is dark. Okay, so it's good to know that. That's part of basic right view. That's why we aspire to something better. The good news, and the thing that is helpful to focus upon, is that your nature is superior to Mara. So deep down in there is something superior and something that can transcend all Maras. So that is something truly worth contemplating, and something that will give you courage and confidence. So Lord Buddha conquered Mara. He demonstrated that it is possible. So did all of the Arahants. There's one example where Mara entered the stomach of Mahamoggallana in his last life. And Mahamoggallana recognized, hey, I see you, Mara. What are you doing? Don't think I can't see you. I can see you. Get out. And then Mahamoggallana, foremost in psychic powers, equal in psychic powers to Lord Buddha, Mahamoggallana said to Mara, you know, a few lifetimes ago, I was you. Now, this is very interesting. This is very interesting. And it shows us, I actually love this story, and I'm glad it's in the life story of Mahamoggallana, because it shows us that there's no point hating Mara. That's a wonderful thing about Buddhism, is it's not that dualistic. There's nothing or no one or no being that's inherently evil all the time in a permanent way. And this is the wonderful thing about the Buddha's teachings and about reality, is that every single conscious being, even the most evil, has the potential to become a Buddha. So a few lives later, and that should give us hope that everybody can get out of Mara's snare if they cultivate the Eightfold Path. And this should help us to be able to look at even the beings with the most oppressed minds. We should be able to use our imagination and understand. One day this being may be a Buddha or a great disciple or an Arahant. Currently their mind is affected by darkness. And also in the past, we may have been more affected by darkness than them, because it goes, you know, up and down, forwards and backwards. So we defend ourselves from Mara by keeping the precepts, by meditating every day, by recollecting our potential, by recollecting what our refuge is. And the good news is that our level of Barami, it's not very likely that the actual Mara will turn up. He would more likely send one of his underlings. But if you become more powerful and more serious and more virtuous and more spiritually potent and start thinking of benefiting millions of beings, you better expect a call. Because Mara does want to keep everybody trapped. For that lifetime, he does want to keep people trapped in samsara. And spread metta to Mara. Ajahn told me, if ever you see Mara, Ajahn, don't try to fight him. Just spread metta. Because only the Buddha conquers Mara. Okay, Ajahn, cup. I'll do that. So yes, we have kilesa mara, karma mara. We defend against the kilesas by having our commitment to ethics, doing our meditation and our chanting, listening to Dhamma talks, practicing. And then the influence that Mara can have over us lessens the less karma that we make with kilesa. And the more karma that we make with sila, samadhi, and panya, the less, and you can see it as an analogy of darkness and lightness. So the more you're involved with kilesa, the more you're unethical, the darker your mind is. That's a lot of Mara in there. The more you're generous, ethical, virtuous, cultivating your mind, bright, clear mind, Mara's influence is less and less and very weak. Eventually, it's important to understand you never conquer the being. You let go of your attachments. You conquer your ignorance, you conquer your delusion, you conquer your attachments. You don't have to conquer any other beings. You have to let go of your attachments. And then you conquer Mara. You conquer Mara's ability to influence your mind because you let go of your attachments. I wish you every success in avoiding him as much as you can and escaping the lair. Good luck.
Thank you, Prajan. Question for dear Ajahn. I have a few questions for you with reference to the recent war in Gaza. I saw these very saddening images of children severely hurt, people drenched in blood, loved ones mourning their losses, etc. A. Why would the merit of being born as a human in fact bring so much suffering? I mean, if that being was an animal, say a bird, they could have flown away to safety and no one will make obstacles at immigration checkpoints, etc.
Yeah, so the human realm is between the heavens and the hells. So what most people don't understand is I can't remember how many realms there are below us. There's a lot. It's like 16 or something. Where it's worse, beings are more miserable, generally speaking. And so for people who've had like I know the person who wrote this question is coming from a nice middle-class family, having a good education, probably knows lots of nice people. So for people who've had a good family, good opportunities in this human life, there becomes maybe a kind of an assumption this is the way it should be. There might be some challenges now and then, but you get by with little help from your friends. Now, whether you have friends, how much help you receive, how difficult things are, it's related to the previous question as well, depends on the kind of karma that you've made. So you can get the human birth, you have the human body, doesn't mean you have, this is an interesting idea, isn't it? Human rights. It's a very beautiful idea. It's an idea that I'm quite attached to as well. But you don't, just because you get a human body, have rights. It depends very much upon where you were born. And you can see in history, depending on the leader, whether they're virtuous or not. Those rights are often rescinded for periods of time. And oftentimes societies need to fight to get rights back. So there's no inherent rights that come with the human situation, unfortunately. I wish there were. What we have is our individual karma and group karmas. So people being born in a place where there is war, famine, disease, those people were not practicing as much generosity, were harsher in their speech, quite possibly stole. And the other thing that we kind of forget, we're not so truthful at times. And as Buddhists, we have to be truthful, but when you look at your plate of food, most people aren't such strict vegetarians. When you look at your plate of food each day and you think lamb, delicious, veal, delicious, and we don't think that that was a little baby that was taken from a mother and that the mother felt sad. We don't think that as the lamb was killed, it was full of fear. We don't think that the lamb, we're not thinking about all the time that the lamb cried out in pain. We're not thinking that the veal, the little baby cow, cried out in pain. We're not mindful that the mother, I lived in a monastery which was close to a cow farm where they would take the baby cows away from the mothers several years in a row to sell the baby cows as veal. And those cows cried for 3 days and 3 nights nonstop. I don't even think they slept. It was one of the saddest things. We're coming down from my kuti and I'd hear these, ooh, ooh, a whole field of crying cows. Why? Because they loved their babies. And they didn't want them taken away. And so similarly, I was walking with my friend Ajahn in northern England, and there were little lambs. And I asked him, what do they do with these lambs? He says, yeah, mostly the lambs are taken away and sold as lamb. People like soft, tender meat. But the mother is left in the field because she's good to have lamb and next year and lamb the next year. And so the person who gets the worst karma is the person who takes away the little lamb and kills the lamb. That person's getting the really heavy karma, but we are all involved in causing tremendous pain and difficulty to other beings. It's part of why samsara is unsatisfactory. It's like samsara is a sad place. The conditioned world is full of suffering and is unsatisfactory. And so the children who are being separated from their mothers and being wounded at a young age and full of fear, that might have been a person that killed lambs for a lifetime in a previous life, or veal, or who was a fisherman. So this is all very, very common phenomenon. Most of us, I myself, if someone offers fish, I eat fish. I personally don't eat lamb or veal because whatever, for what I just said. But I do eat mutton. I do eat, if it's offered to me, I eat some pork. And I try to eat small amounts to sustain the body. I can't imagine tucking into a big T-bone steak myself, but the way Thais eat meat normally is they chop it in thin slivers and they mix it in with vegetables in the curry. So you eat small portions with a lot of vegetables. But there's a lot of suffering in the way human beings produce food. And so people do, in fact, one of my teachers said the reason the lockdowns, most of humanity got locked down for a period of time, he said, was because of the way that human beings raise food in the modern time. These chicken factories with the lights on 24 hours a day with 4 or 5 or 6 chickens in the one cage together being fed hormones so they grow fast, having their wings clipped, being stuck in a cage. And the grain-fed beef in lots. All of these animals that are reared in tight confines to become food. That's billions and billions a year, and human beings eat them. And so this great master said he could see the whole planet had this darkness around it. There was this massive heavy karma that was a group karma for all of humanity related to the way we rear food. So we all had to be stuck at home. We all had to have our wings clipped. And some people made the most of that. Other people suffered more. But karma is real. And beings are fair according to their karma. So it's worthy of compassion. But what we need to do is make a note. What is good karma? How are my ways of making it? Lord Buddha said one should never criticize a person who does things for the sake of merit, because merit is synonymous with happiness. So merit produces auspicious circumstances, opportunities, more pleasant feelings, less painful feelings. That's why Buddhists are religious about making merit, and it is praised by the wise. Sometimes people criticize, these people that do things for merit, it's greedy. we need to have a healthy self-interest because samsara is a dangerous place, and the merits that we make support us in this and our future lives. So I myself am very fond of merit. I like making mountains of it whenever possible. And I encourage you to make mountains of merit whenever possible.
4b, does this also mean that there are infinite number of beings trapped in this vicious cycle, where they are born into darkness and fall into darkness forever and ever?
Is there an infinite number of beings trapped in these vicious cycles, some of them destined to be trapped in darkness forever and ever? That's a very interesting question. There is one great master from Thailand last century, Lungta Mahabua, and he said that there were three types of beings that he could see. Ajahn Mahabua. He said that there were beings who were destined for liberation. They had kind of very strong, good character traits. They were going to knuckle down and they were going to liberate themselves. And he said that, relatively speaking, is a small number of beings. There was another group of beings who may make it or may not, because they're attached to comfort and a bit lazy. So they have the merit, they have the potential, but will they knuckle down and do the work? It's not sure. And then he said there's another category of beings who are hopeless. Their minds are so consumed by darkness, all they can ever think to do is be involved with more darkness. And they go from darkness to darkness, lower and lower, with no hope of liberation. So he was a great practitioner, and that's what he saw. I don't know. Now, if that seems too depressing to you, you can become a Vajrayanist because apparently the Vajrayana pure view is that one day all beings will be Buddhas. And they make a vow to liberate all consciousness, even every blade of grass, until no defiled conditions exist and everybody's established in Nibbana as a fully enlightened Buddha. That's apparently part of the Vajrayana pure view. One slight problem with this is I can't remember ever reading that in any of the 84,000 Dharma verses of Shakyamuni Buddha in the Sutta Pitaka. So I'm not sure if it's actually true, but it's a very beautiful idea. And I can see that committing to it would be quite joyful. But one might have to spend a very, very, very long time being joyful. One of the qualities that the bodhisattvas possess, apparently, is two qualities: unshakable optimism and joyful effort. Now, if you were committed to liberating every sentient being until the end of samsara, those two qualities would be very, very helpful. But it's a very long time. Now, I was attending the Dalai Lama's teachings 19 years ago as an 8-pansa monk at Sera Monastery in southern India. The Dalai Lama was giving a commentary on Asanga's treatise on the 10 Bodhisattva Bhumis. And he was talking about the Bodhisattva vow. I think it was a 5-day teaching, if I recall. And it might have been longer. He was talking about the Bodhisattva vow, and he was saying, it's often said in Vajrayana that Vajrayana is superior because by practicing Vajrayana Tantra, you can become a Buddha in one lifetime. And the Dalai Lama said, I personally don't know anybody who did that. And then he said, the reason we should aspire to be Buddhas is that we will be able to liberate all sentient beings. That's why the Bodhisattva vow is superior. And that never made any sense to me, because if a Bodhisattva becomes a Buddha and liberates all sentient beings, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, what are we doing here? Shouldn't they have liberated us already? There's been a good number of Buddhas. There's a chant in the Theravada, the 28 Buddhas. Why didn't they liberate me? They probably tried. Now, The Dalai Lama said, so I got it from the Lama's mouth, the Dalai Lama said, it is not possible for any one Buddha to liberate all sentient beings. Ah. But then he was talking to 15,000 monks and he says, but we should all aspire to, because if we all become Buddhas, then there's seriously a chance that we will liberate all sentient beings, because every single one of us has karmic connections with different masses of beings. And if we all become Buddhas and we all liberate all those sentient beings, then we're getting closer to our goal. But the Dalai Lama did basically said that no individual person can liberate all sentient beings. Not possible. And then it's a matter of choice. Like there are beings, there are bodhisattva practitioners, there are bodhisattvas who have not yet received a prediction, who decide to stay on in samsara indefinitely because they want, that's just how they prefer to, that's their answer to this conundrum. And you need to understand that a being who has full samadhi barami and full wisdom barami probably isn't full metta barami. They're not suffering very much. They did invest a few million lives into that capacity. I remember the Dalai Lama explaining a concept of the enlightenment that exists between samsara and nibbana. That's the kind of enlightenment that a 10th level bodhisattva has. A being who has cultivated virtue for millions of lives has a mind like an anagami. What does that mean? No greed, no hatred, only a subtle sense of self, a sense of self bound up with liberating other beings. That's as unwholesome as it gets. And there are bodhisattvas who keep being reborn for the sake of benefiting others, who have not yet got their prediction of Buddhahood because they don't want it, because they made a vow to stay until samsara ends. So such beings exist, and if you're willing to invest 1 billion lives, you can become one of them. And then at least you're trying to do something about this possibly infinite number of dark beings. You know, at least you're trying to help them. Whether or not they can be helped, who knows? But this is a decision that everybody needs to make in terms of their own aspiration. If you want, seeing the dismal, sad nature of samsara, are you going to liberate yourself as quickly from it as possible? If you want to, sadhu, say I. Recognizing that you're beginning to get some interesting qualities and capacities and an ability to help others, are you going to take some kind of a middle way with it? Ajahn recommends that people aim for stream entry and then make the vow that they will use their remaining 7 lives to benefit as many beings as possible. That's a nice middle way. Or do you want to be like Mahamoggallana and Sariputta? Interesting. You might even be Mara for one lifetime. It's a bit dangerous taking these higher end paths. Mahamoggallana is saying to Mara that after that life, I went to a Vijji hell for a long, long time. You want to read the description of a Vijji hell? Oh, scary. So there's, you know, it's pros and cons. Your choice. I wish you all the best. I hope something I said was useful for your samsaric perspective and aspiration for liberation.
For Seem, Ajahn, do you think these conflicts will get worse and more often in the future?
Oh, so we're going to end on a downer. Unfortunately, I do. In the short term. You know, I used to say when I was teaching my retreats in Malaysia, the good old days, I used to say to people, we are living in a period of relative abundance, relative freedom, incredible abundance, incredible freedom, and prosperity and peace, compared to the kind of things our parents and grandparents, great parents went through. So my own mother's house was bombed by German forces in Manchester when she was 5. So my mother knows what it's like to be displaced by war. My father's, both grandfathers were in the military on Ajahn side. You didn't know I was from noble warrior stock, did you? Well, I don't know how noble they were, but they were in the military. And so the Depression, my grandparents lived through the Depression. My great parents lived through the Depression. My grandparents lived through the war. My mother's own house was bombed. So it tends to be somewhat cyclical. You get a period of, and I remember saying during those retreats in Malaysia, don't take this for granted. This can always change at any moment, and we never know when and we never know how. This is why we need to have a daily meditation practice, a daily chanting practice, be as generous as we can while we have resources, because we don't know when and how things change in samsara. It can happen very fast. So I have a lot of hobbies. I study a lot of things in kind of some amateur capacity. And you will hear, I don't know, it seems like on the news now, everybody's predicting a recession next year, a big recession next year. And a lot of people are talking about a debt crisis with all of the governments indebted to one another and to various central banks. And unfortunately, when there is a big economic crisis, it's normally, if we can look at modern history, that's normally associated with an increase in wars. It seems to be the way they wipe the slate clean of their debt, is that they kind of trash one system and much of society and start a new system. So I'm sure you've all heard of the Great Reset. The Great Reset is kind of a phrase that's been around for a while. So I personally have a sense that there will be deepening recession and there will be increasing conflicts for the next few years. After that, I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, we get another period of relative abundance, prosperity, and peace. But one gets the sense that the current system is going to change. And so I do recommend that people don't keep all their money in the bank. Have some, I mentioned before that in America, they have a disaster preparedness month once a year. I think that's the government's way of saying you guys better be ready to take care of yourselves if you need to. So it's good to have, as our great-grandparents lived through the Depression, a lot of those people learned to can food, store food, salt meats, keep seeds. That was just a normal way of life until about a generation ago. And it is sensible to have some vacuum sealed rice, some canned things, some investments that are not just cash in the bank. And I did tell some close students back in 2015 that I'd heard that gold was going to go up. You're not supposed to give advice on investments, monks, but sometimes, like, if you care for people and you heard something, you want to tell a few close friends, And of course, gold doubled since then. So those three people who listened to me, sadhu. Some of my other friends said, well, Ajahn, if I had some savings, I would invest in gold. The biggest thing I have, of course, is a debt. So that's not, some people don't have a lot of choice, of course. But I would say it would be wise at this point in time to understand that inflation is probably going to continue for a couple of years. And travel and fuel probably become more expensive. Travel will become a bit more difficult. And after that, things will probably become somewhat normalized again. If we're still alive, if we're not in a country that got bombed. So, and I could be wrong. Everything might get better and better. I hope it does. Everything might get safer and safer, and the governments work out. Wouldn't it be nice if all the governments just said, let's just cancel everyone's debt. Let's just say, screw you to the central banks. We're not paying you back. China owns America's debt. America owns China's debt. Okay, you don't have to pay it back. I don't have to pay it back. And okay, let the banks go bankrupt. None of you have to pay your mortgages anymore. Just consider your house to be yours. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could just do things differently for a change? But how things get done is probably depending on our group karma and which psychopaths have managed to climb to the top of the human pile in terms of wealth at this point in time. But keeping precepts, being generous, being ethical, meditating every day, cultivating metta, all of these is powerful and protective. And it's interesting that even during the Great Depression, some people were okay, right? And even during wars, some people were okay. Some people, and in every disaster, some people escape. So merit is real. And it's good to have strategic optimism. So on that note, I wish you all well. May we be strategically optimistic. The Dalai Lama says we should hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I leave
Sadhu,
that
sadhu,
for your
sadhu.
thoughtful consideration.